Hello, boxing is about music science. The sciences share an identity. So the ancients revealed boxing, the martial arts, and wrestling together, where and how they had experienced the influences of with the criminal foreign influences, how locations, areas, and states could become criminally foreign influenced, and how that could affect the quality of human fact-cheating nature we are, relative to what causes positive or negative value nature progressions, action natures, where the science of evolution, not the theory of evolution, the science of evolution does not leave out the ground. All gather round, or forest is gone, beast of ideas. So, this is music science. The notes individually grouped in together, they have a distinct identity of relationship to themselves, /S, as the cell nucleus, cell body, and the cell wall. Those distinct selves have a shared self. So they are self /S as one identity of volume, making more of itself, with two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, gaining by the value of the types of air and the types of earth elements. Also is a mixture. See, this is a machine that's perfect. It's the perfect world that leads science. Theories across the board of nations A through Z. They are captivated identities of sophistication individually grouped in together. No matter how powerful any leader could get, the breaching method, the proverbial devil, the predicate auxiliary system method knew that it could keep them shock and awe, trying to counter what is fluent through our nations, exploiting what was revealed by the entire species working together before sciences became criminally foreign influenced. They had been the phenomenon of perfect observation of the perfect method and system. In other words, a microscope is the perfect instrument, is a perfect instrument to look far. A microscope is a perfect instrument to make what is close and real small, bigger, closer to, more observable. And in this trinity, correlation nature has one means. There are as exceptions, where and how it is two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature further, like the value of truth that came before the order of the finite now, the finest, smallest detail, denied or not. See, people start debating such after people make simple sentences. For example, say, the news put me to fake words in a news article. And they've been in a number of news articles, the same places and other places, which is also them confirming their roles with all kinds of things they're not sure about, but they are aware that they are being and having been exploited. They just play hear no evil, see no evil, and pretend that. See, this is this is how hundreds of nations at once what maintained the collusion with this originally still. That prevents that and how pseudoscience, in other words, they have laws, truth, they use truths for lies. In other words, they're not even true. But no one's going to afford the quality of fact treatment nature. I mean, time treatments. They aren't going to use anything but time too fast, too slow. And premises treatments and delusions, criminally foreign influence, increasingly rules crimes methods used, which is simultaneously uses of all the self-value database relationships that are that with people tied to them pretend they don't realize this as victims only capable of being database relationships. That's how we're revealed by the system that put us to the same order, and to realize the value of that distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Simultaneous values. So it's one thing to have value as a right for a salesperson or for markets. They have to tell the markets and the bankers and all the different sciences, the schools, they're charging people money. They have to, and they have shared hundreds of countries at once. This broken, criminally foreign influence monopoly system, where the surface names and the ones not, all identities of sophistication, each branch of government is used remotely. All locations are. When they say, oh, George Washington owned slaves, they prevent a quality of fact treatment nature. In other words, that is not true. And that's in collusion with it. This is a method that would have there are proofs that they had that the Underground Railroad tied to a house, into houses and into areas in Hartford, Connecticut, like on and off Hartford Hospital, and on and off where Trinity College is. There are people there that are involved with natures of identity thefts and fraud, with timed on and off the campuses, with the locations next to the schools, as people involved with syntax-oriented and sequence shifts-oriented identity thefts and frauds. Also as a method that uses people that aren't even in the same classes. An exception is how they put, in other words, how if you grade, at the end of the grade, they refer to it, oh, that was your class. We graduated in the same class. But a person you never had a physical class with. They're painting illusions, and they're using, talk about regular things, where and how investigations and investigators are simultaneously being and having been used, and the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones also simultaneously differentially, but differentially constantly by what keeps and kept. For example, them originally, the people, all perception of statistics and the sharing of them, access to them, involved with uses of the locations and of comparisons between people leveraged to maintain, covered up originally and still blamed on other things other than themselves. The real reasons of all good treatments and bad treatments originally and still in collusion. So we don't have free speech to talk about what is seen, to speak about what is simultaneous. Like they're not following mandated law. They're offensively using and having used Facebook, their Facebook pages interbranch for elections crimes. For example, per their roles with other natures of abuses of each age of fact treatment nature. And from the only positions capable of countering it, So it is also how they're differentially constantly themselves, just defending a branch of government and just readings of the statutes that are only there because they're criminally foreign influence. They were leaving out and having left out exceptions in exception nature. So they've been forging names and switching names. And simultaneously they've been increasingly valuing their roles known and unknown. But even when it's unknown, it's increasingly self-valued that it's unknown, but it's real anyways, because and everyone's prevented real evidences because everyone's forced to speak behind each other's backs. So Wethersfield schools and intercity schools recorded, confessed, and demonstrated roles with Wethersfield police and with courts like New Britain Superior Court, Hartford courts. They've been fabricating audio and video transcripts and spreading lies and illusions through kids and their roles with wire crimes, mail crimes, falsified police reports, forging names, switching names, which stacks names. They prevent people calm means to counter their roles with predicate acts that are connected, uses of different natures of organized crime and of war crimes, roles and motivations, as the only people allowed to be associated with what is also inter-campuses and intra-campuses manifest. What is actually involved with the statistics and what is actually going down with all locations, areas, and states. Where we are memories, no. Where we are instances, no. Where what is simultaneously is increasingly valued. See, to these theater jobs that are bridged sciences conjunctions. See, but that are also increasingly valuing how they exploit exceptions in exception nature by their roles preventing mandated law offensively also. That is why it is so necessary to demonstrate what is actually recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, including them pretending other, because the way they can get away with pretending other is uses of recorded criminally foreign influence premises treatments, also simultaneously delusions wrought, also as victim reactions that they knew would, the breaching method knew would be rules, crimes, predators, self-value. For example, the sequence shifts are rules crimes, mail crimes, wire crimes with the falsified police reports, switching names, switching narratives on the all the fake things being put into databases since before computers. Now they're looking, you know what I'm saying? And so we become speaking about things that they want us to speak about more. I'm talking about this. They want to pretend because someone typed something. They also put me in fake words with people. And I know that I caught them. And they didn't follow it. So then I switched what I said. So now, they're the ones who didn't follow the rules. And they don't have the right to do that. And they did it formally. So, in other words, so they didn't have the right to lie where they've been using the right to lie. We've had criminally foreign influence uses of locations, areas, states, and campuses of each age and nature. They have methods recorded. For example, in other words, they know that no one's going to keep in their mind or have means to respond to someone from another classroom with a timed instance, and it doesn't mean anything. But meanwhile, in the background, these are masters of knowing how to tell things and confess things and make statements. Increasingly to people like teachers of kids, while through the kids simultaneously, like doctors of psychology and psychiatry, involved with their patients and criminals, with identity thefts and frauds. Since they were kids, attaching other kids with fake conversations and ties to themselves and to their family members, including as doctors. They're pretending to have fake ties to kids into databases no one's ever checking. When you go to courts, that's part of the reason they don't let you speak. And then they just attach you to fake quotations. And they confess and record the 14 names, switching names roles. That's what they're doing. They're putting you in more and more fake things recorded into databases. And now the computer, so then they value fake sides. When I say fake sides, I mean fake sides of correlation into Trinity. We should have this discerned. But not one has learned because everyone's fake. Needs to pretend others, so they pretend they lie to themselves and others because they're a victim, child abuse predators. The branches of government, witch trials. They show the victims of it. They say phishing. They say the President Trump got railroaded. He's right. They're forcing him to use that, say right, and take collusion with them. By then, in other words, it's worse than that. If you entertain it, because everyone is only capable of entertaining that, that's only because we have not gotten through to this. What revealed the republic for which we stand in the Campus Martius in ancient times before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. They knew that violence and or positive treatments in the hands of and as criminal insidiousness natures, criminally foreign influenced, especially when criminally legalized, especially this way, as we'll examine through Little Rap Guy and Friends, which I'm trying to tell you guys too, faster this way. But no one responds when mandated law. And in other words, the courts treatments, and the media treatments, and the military treatments, and the Coast Guard involvement, and the on-off campuses like Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, they were recorded, confessed, and demonstrated with people associated with Ray Reynolds and Westbrook. I barely know him. They made that instance so he could pretend to know me. And with Mike Pandoff, they're involved with people on Central Connecticut State University that are also involved with the locations leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. Please fear Mike Pence. Tell presidents, see chiefs. So they have, for example, there are recorded conscious uses while pretending other, and nature's pretending other, but conscious uses of how Colin Kaepernick and the movement to kneel, and the president in the movement to keep pride in an American flag, pride in an individual voice. See, the individual voices prevented Mr. Kaepernick and Mr. Trump sickly distinctly by a method that knew that it could keep everyone blaming other things, others themselves, for what it was doing, non-distinctly, as the victim predator here, the worst one that we have to counter. In other words, they're just forcing fake sides, no truth, to use the countless revelations that come from how the law was pretending to be the law, that while they had witch trials and slavery at the same time, and North and South. When you do that, if you do that one place, it shows what's manifest right now, what they are teaching and having been taught as American history. It shows also in the other sciences where they're using their uses of positive and negative things associated with that simultaneously. They're going to show where the fact treatment natures in cases go back to investigations that show that investigations, killers, the real things that happened and fake things that happen, and things that are happening just to keep a stream, to keep other things, others themselves, blamed and defended to keep premises treatments that are tactically criminally foreign influenced used. So positive and negative treatments can be insidiously used. Simultaneously, insidiously, everyone's using identity by the breaching screen, worse than tools, worse than weapons method that has all that employed as its own. Before any economic value systems, this employed nature itself to demonstrate what it does. That's why and how it keeps everyone engineering self-cultivated roles with it. Because nature keeps demonstrating it in ways that make people need to respond as fact-keeping nature. And when that's prevented, that's increasingly the outcome. And the violence is increasingly people blaming leaving out the quality and forced to leave out the quality of fact keeping really leads up to violence. They're preventing the killers and the innocent people from telling the truth in all kinds of natures of cases, because there are remote uses of the different types of natures of crimes, where and how the only three branches of government and the private and the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones, and the roles with the database relationship, and then further intercampuses and further intersciences are bridged. This method knew that we would have to hide negative value progressions, the real causes. Each modern country would. And it knew that it would have to do so by uses of roles with that only fathomed already having been perfected against the Native Americans, sustained against them. That's one of the first proofs it is more practical to convict that and how, and that Native Americans were here since ancient times is more probable, is more practical though, to convict that. And as a counterposition, not just as a position, relative to where and how we have, other than that was actual, pretended legitimate. See, those are positive and negative treatments that have conjunction with all kinds of identities of jobs and of titles and of locations of natures of industries and of sciences. Nature is identity relationship to itself, which is relationship to positive and negative simultaneously, because the simultaneous is in demonstration to us this way. And its course is the perfect course, and it is increasing identity of volume. And it is exceptions in exception nature in demonstration of the same thing, where and how it is in demonstration of its own identity of volume, and how it is making more of its own identity of volume while it is these concentrated forms of it. In other words, other forms of it. So the same human identity of volume, the same volume. If you're black, all of a sudden you have you have revelations. When someone says things about history. In other words, when someone speaks, even with pride about the country, it's not that they're doing it with the pride that's wrong. It's the premises treatments with it. It's the fakeness with it. It's also, per all that, tied to that offensive evidence perception. There is a Justin Kovinskis who confirmed A whole bunch of people tied to him, record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have roles with investigators and with investigations that already painted themselves doing way worse than they put a whole bunch of men and women in jail for. Poor people, too. They bring up poverty. The people pretending passion is the most against poverty, but they're putting kids in jail who are stacked on top of each other, no nature there. Meanwhile, the suburbs were tactically denatured since before our founding parents were born. Flat, grass, woods, all tactically denatured. We know that they had criminally foreign influence, database relationships, self-value. That's what the revelations and what caused slavery. See, but people are working to keep each age of fact, cheaping nature, uses of passions and emotions for a breaching screen, pretending to be patriotism natures, and or believing to be patriotism natures, and or pretending to be against that, and or believing themselves against that. In other words, you could believe that George Washington was a slave owner, but there are proofs that you're wrong. And even debating it leaves all the proofs that the Constitution is abridged from being exploited by everyone simultaneously. That's how syntactically, practically, scientifically, properly, morally, ethically, we do it. Proper. What is actually morals and ethics. So, in other words, I don't know Joe Dennis. And I didn't know him in the past, with the exception in the past too, but not like a decade ago maybe was the last time I saw him. And when I was a little kid, in other words, that's one of the guys, was involved with sequence shifts. And I don't know Rich Dombrowski. He called me when I was a little kid one time. Asked me if I wanted to buy his paintball gun. I'd seen him before I went to the first Cub Scout meeting. It was at Sal Civiolo's house on Turard Highway. In other words, he was in a class of mine before in like 4th grade. I never had a conversation with him though. Never had anything positive or negative. But in other words, in other words, apparently in the background, demonstrably in the background, there were roles with lie progressions that were connected to predicate acts roles, and wrongdoing roles, and sequence shifts, and identity thefts and frauds roles, with instances, and with narratives tied to the instances, and uses of them. Instances known and not known on records, real and made up, against everyone. Sickly, distinctly against everyone. And differentially that way, but constantly that way too. No. And that's relevant to where we are at syntax nature, that is the complete possession of a breaching method that put the color with the law, and it used a minority from the countries they kept, individually grouped and together. Victims need to figure out how to react to it. So we have witch trials, where we have Jim Crow laws. And that's all right if that's all they could agree. But it's not all right if that's all they could agree, and they pretend that's all they could agree because there's no breaching method involved. There's a breaching method involved. There's complete possession over the premises treatments of the Democratic Party and over the Republican Party, sickly distinctly, and over the alternatives, sickly distinctly, per their uses of identity ground locations, on off the Department of Homeland Security. MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, one of them reported over 1 million instances of people coming into the country. And said, people, when you look for one of the things it is always, and it's more than, they say, resources. You have to look always, not denying exception nature, and or using where it's the one that is, in other words, instead of blaming racism for slavery, if you blame a predicate acts delivery system method, one thing we know it was sustained, a predicate acts delivery system method, then you get revelations from that. In other words, then you understand why and how there are wrongdoers and wrongdoings motivated really. How investigations could be used to lock people into fact treatments and name treatments and time treatments that they had to pretend they were legitimate. Now, where obviously not one identity ground location was legitimate. So it had employed. Where that's not true, and our nature is completely legitimate and wants to be more and more of that. Naturally. See, that was forsaken. Shaking boughs. The law allows. Build wall. So, in other words, there's the cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall. And the cell walls, in other words, they're all working together to make more and more forever nature. Only the extent of it is debatable. But we are not on forever's course. We are not using science and passions. So then that's all styles that want to debate about passions and emotions, leaving out sequence true. They want to leave out the value of it that came before the order of the finite now. They want to leave out the finite now. You can't be led by what is all things at once. You can't be led by science. So they have to self-value how each of the sciences have uses of the word theory physically, with physical delusions and criminally foreign influence premises treatment simultaneously. Which would be all right, would be overcome if it was just natural. But there are also rules, crimes, predators. Those motivations as victims are maintained from off all locations. Then it's maintained on off them. And it's using what is manifest inter and intra campuses per methods that we can observe when you follow mandated law. And so the news also sustains lies about us in self-valued roles. Knowingly, they go in like a real fast mind towards topics treatments and subjects treatments that are also, they can't be defended and afford anyone to teach about how subjects have conjunction to what is simultaneous. In other words, you can't even teach about conjunctions probably if you don't teach about the identity of volume they are non-distinctly. For example, correlative and coordinating conjunctions. And so, this is why. The cell, one of the things the cells, they're making a increasing identity of volume. not just by being distinct identity of volumes, but by being distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous, that per its way that's also positive unto itself, and as itself the identity of sequence nature. I mean, the identity of simultaneous nature, that inventions work or not in relationship to it, and they are further positive or not in relationship to it. So science has not been allowed to use the simple revelations. And then we have to fight with the people that are brought up when people debate as knaves. They're forcing knave treatments of industries and names and identity ground locations where everyone's already being and having been tortured as such in the first place. We weren't supposed to have torture. Simultaneously, they make you do other. Simultaneously, what's manifest? I tell it best, boxing. So there's music science. The notes of music, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They share an identity, individually grouped and together. The same way, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity. So boxing is more individual, and it is to try to stand independent, no grappling. Martial arts is both try to be independent, stand and fight, or whatever, or part grappling, part standing, fighting. In wrestling, you have to grapple. And it is important to understand where and how the courts were involved with witch trials and slavery and Jim Crow laws and takes on it since, how they are involved with violence against each identity ground location, sickly, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, while pretending other too. And this is where and how we are quality as fact cheap in nature. This is where and how they start fights between people. They form fake relationships between people, and completely made up ones tied to that more and more because they have to pretend to perceive things. That's why no one can remember the past when they're older. Also because people are consciously trying to do that. People associated with the Oliveri family at the end of the bridge, that goes over the Putnam Bridge, I guess, goes over to Glastonbury, and all along Route 3, right down the street from there. I don't know if they still live there. The state judicial branch offices, and all along Route 3 are people that were in the past involved with instances that then were exploited when they were older, timed intercities too, on and off campuses, roles of predicate acts. Also people in their cliques with tied to the people who answer the phone for the Wethersfield police and for the medical hospital. They have foreign and domestic doctors, psychology, and military families involved with overt gangs, drugs, overt private, overt criminal enterprises, and the interbranch predicate acts, identity thefts, and fraud cliques, fabricating audio and video into databases, attaching kids to fake locations, pretending passions and emotions about real instances and made up ones, juxtaposed. Because even the real things that they could say, oh, that kid, they had to hide things their roles with locations, instances between people that only would know each other's names because of their involvements. So they had to pretend people had natural involvements growing up that weren't. So then they're pretending people make conspiracy theories. The same people that are preventing us short words to follow mandated law to counter how WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, CNN, Fox News, they're irreproachable. And they won't fix CNN's roles with that, also because of a whole bunch of the locations next to them are also involved with the buildings of next to the state capitol, and with people with the 3 spots at the end of the Brum Turnpike involved with identity thefts and frauds that are timed. Also roles with people with the Sandy Hook and Newtown and families that are associated with the leaderships of prisons and their databases. And the various uses, including the military's families with it. Now these are also people with the countries that attacked, with the representatives from the countries that attacked, per their narratives, as transnational gangs with the World Trade Center attack, that are also the ones recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with the locations next to the Department of Homeland Security, which is down the street from Fox Connecticut News. And with a whole bunch of people tied to Johnny Duke and involved with this. See, these are people that make confessions and statements, and then they know the FBI and the CIA that are criminally involved, with my town's police chief 1 year ago. All involved with predicate acts on my street that are syntax oriented. They're also having been timed, coordinated intercities on and off my campuses, but they've been forging names and switching names. They pretend that people don't speak clear. So, after they've been stacking, switching names, you can't get a response in writing. They want me to write a response. They called me and stacked like 4 or 5 months ago now. Like 5 months ago now. See, almost a half a year is gone now. And before the pandemic, right before the pandemic, I was in the process of countering they were preventing that by demonstrating more rules with it. Officer Jerry Miller, who is involved with FBI and CIA in military, foreign, and domestic, and overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and fire departments with wire crimes and wire crime methods that are through things that police forums and courts and things like that they know they're involved with for reasons they agree with or not, that they claim they think is only there. Everyone missed what is actually there, what they're doing. So they already painted themselves into corners. And this is how they make people do roles with that. So I don't know what Joe Dennis wrote or said, or John Dennis. I never had a conversation with John Dennis in my life. But these are people involved on off Central Connecticut State University with a former Mayor Gold, with a whole bunch of other people, and police forms, state police, a police chief years ago and one now, and his family member, his extended family members, also all along Route 3, with and on and off the state judicial branch offices with the fines of family members, also with the courts, intercities involved on and off with the houses next to them, also confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed on Facebook to me and others as strangers, all these confessions at once. No, that's one of the things they do to make, and then they pretend they know those people. They made me believe. I remember that night. I saw. One time I went to called me and told me to go to his house. Eric Oliveri. And he seen they put him in my class one time. I had virtually nothing to do with him in the class. So people would make statements about other people's names, particularly the guy, but it was all tied. These are people involved with leading up to the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan. That in ways they don't know. But in other words, they were involved with falsified police reports with databases, names uses, and people stacking that to exploit it later. And then, differentially and constantly, variably and constantly, and not for the reasons they pretend, and not for the reasons they pretend that's why that's true. And they pretend people make conspiracy theories. So Russians and Americans have roles with the justice departments and with mental health. See, they have, especially the women. That's in other words. That's where the men and women collude against women with actual integrity. And you can't. It's not improper for a male to fight with a female. In other words, they won't follow mandated law for you, though. Then they'll use that term, mental health, and go to an expert. If you go to an expert, the experts are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. If you go to them and you try to stop things that are going to stop people from getting killed and bad things, they'll pretend. In other words, if you try to report what's actually recorded, they're going to attach their physical delusions and you to fake words with themselves. They're going to make confessions to you. They're going to then, rather than allow you to get someone's name on paper, they're going to forge names, switch names. Everyone starts speaking to other people. Every exception to the law they already exploited. That's why it's there, those exceptions to the law. In other words, if someone was going to walk over step over the bench at the court, that's wrong. But if the court is with rape threats, that's worse, and that came first. See, we have what's simultaneously being hid here by a masters of it, masters of it, because they were used remotely they were shown how to be masters of it by what they don't even fathom. They're used remotely. So even the witness protection program is involved with their predicate acts and methods. It shows how they use the sensibilities of others as victims, our only defenses against them, and how with overt criminal enterprises and in private ones kept needing to hide the same sequence as finite and active lies and uses of identity ground locations of other people's names at the same instances, connected through time. It's not by accident. It's not just because in other words, mental health. We have people dishonestly using the remote uses of all the judges on Fox Connecticut News. Everyone's saying, hear no evil, see no evil. You better get them on to follow mandated law, pick one name and sequence and get into writing. They attach little kids and me to fake communications with their officers on the police department. Fake words. In other words, the same people that are involved with Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon before the World Trade Center attack and since. The same people involved with opinions regarding the KKK theme and the Confederate flag theme, recorded involved with forging names, switching names, other natures of predicate acts as their motivations that were in their natures used remotely as their roles with the World Trade Center attack and with the investigators of it. Hartford Hospital has roles with that too. So they have all these countries that they study on Central Connecticut State University, criminally foreign influence since it started. All locations were still criminally foreign influenced. Science never spoke. People want to argue that, calling names. Then they get a response. There is no court that's not already criminally involved with the locations. So there are exceptions to the law. We're going to have to teach it.